In the deep silence of space, a patrol ship of the Varan Empire glided across the dark border that separated their controlled territory from the unclaimed void beyond. Stars glittered like cold knives outside the viewing glass, but inside the soldiers, were restless for their duty, was not peaceful exploration, it was control. The Varan Empire had ruled for thousands of years, and their law was simple. Obey or vanish tonight seemed like every other patrol until the sensors caught something small. And drifting near the restricted zone, the crew gathered with curiosity, since few things ever dared to appear this close to the Empire's watch. A young officer pointed at the screen and whispered, "It is not metal scrap. It is intact, Captain Tarlock." Ordered the object pulled in, and the mechanical arms brought it carefully to the deck. The soldiers circled around it, expecting a bomb or a spy drone, but what lay before them made no sense. It was a small box shaped with strange smooth material. Painted white with blue markings, words were written across it in a language none of them recognized, but the translator slowly clicked to life and revealed the message. "To whoever finds this, we hope it helps from Earth." The crew stared at one another. The word Earth was known only in high command records, a primitive planet spoken of in rumors. Some claimed humans were violent, others called them unpredictable, but none imagined they would throw harmless gifts into the void. The box was scanned, but no weapons, no toxins, no trackers were found inside. There were small packets of food bright with colors the soldiers had never seen. Medicine bottles with clear labeling, clean cloth folded with care, and at the very bottom a letter written by hand. The alien eyes studied the careful strokes of ink. The message was simple: may you never go hungry, may you never suffer alone. "We share what we can," the soldiers laughed nervously. Such softness was foolish in a galaxy ruled by force, they mocked. The idea that anyone would waste resources on strangers, yet unease began to crawl inside them. Empires survived on fear, not kindness, and this strange box was a challenge to everything they had been taught. One officer tried to crush the letter, but the captain stopped him with a sharp command. He ordered the box to be sealed and logged as evidence, but secretly his eyes lingered on the human words as the patrol ship returned to its route. Whispers spread across the crew at night. Some could not sleep because they kept remembering the taste of the food, small samples they had dared to try. It was rich and warm, and for a moment they felt cared for in ways their empire never had. Captain Tarlock sat alone in his chamber, holding the folded letter in his clawed hands. He had fought countless wars for the empire. He had burned villages, broken rebels, silenced whispers of freedom. Yet no enemy had ever attacked him with kindness. This simple box felt heavier than any weapon, for it slipped past armor and settled into his heart. Days later, the object was sent to the capital for analysis. Officials laughed at the discovery, calling it a trick or a desperate act of propaganda. But already more patrols were finding similar boxes drifting through space. Each one carried food supplies, medicine, and the same short letters, sometimes signed by different names, sometimes unsigned, but always carrying the same warmth from Earth. The Empire tried to hide the findings, but soldiers spoke and rumors spread. The lower ranks began to tell each other about the taste of human bread, about how the medicine worked better than anything they had been given, about how the letters made them feel seen in a way the Emperor never allowed. Soon people began asking the most dangerous question: why would humans help strangers with no gain? Stories reached the colonies where workers lived under heavy taxes and endless fear. They began to dream of such kindness reaching them too, in taverns. Whispers gruesome claimed it was bait, others believed it was a sign of hope. In one remote outpost, a young soldier secretly kept a human blanket from a package, and when his child grew sick, he wrapped her in it. She recovered quickly, as if touched by unseen strength. The soldier cried, not because she lived, but because he realized the Empire had never once cared if she lived or died. That night he told his wife about the letter. "May you never suffer alone," she whispered back. "Maybe humans are different." The Empire had never feared weapons. They had built their throne upon crushed armies and shattered worlds. But as the first trickles of human kindness drifted deeper into their space, the Emperor unknowingly faced something far more dangerous than fleets or guns. A war not of fire but of hearts had just begun, and it started with one box, one letter floating through the dark. a gift that should not exist yet now could not be forgotten. Whispers moved faster than ships in the vast empire. Where fear was the chain that held billions together, something new had begun to spread. It was not an army, not a rebellion, not even a speech. It was a story about small white boxes drifting in the dark of space, carrying food, medicine, and words, written in simple, human style. Some soldiers had seen them, some had tasted them, and some had hidden them from their superiors because they could not explain why the gifts felt so different. The high command tried to stop the talk. They declared the packages dangerous. They told everyone it was a trick to poison their minds. But the strange truth was clear. The food was real, the medicine healed, the letters were filled with hope, not threats. People had never heard words like, "May you never go hungry," or "May you never suffer alone." Those were words banned by the Empire because they made people believe in something beyond fear. At first the whispers were quiet, spoken only in private corners. A mechanic fixing a ship told his friend that the medicine had saved his brother. A miner on a distant colony said he had seen a soldier cry while reading the letter. A servant in the capital palace claimed that even some guards carried human cloth. Hidden under armor, slowly, the whispers grew stronger in crowded markets, in secret meetings and homes lit by dim lamps. The people spoke of Earth. They did not know where it was or how far, but the idea itself was enough, a place that gave without. Asking a place that sent kindness across the stars. The Empire had always told its citizens that weakness was death, that mercy was foolishness, that only obedience could keep them alive. Yet here were humans breaking every law of survival by sharing what they had with strangers, even enemies. How could such foolishness exist? How could it not have destroyed them long ago? A scholar who once served in the royal archives dared to ask, if humans live this way, then maybe they are stronger than we. No, for no empire has ever survived by kindness, and yet there still stands. His words were erased from records, but others had already heard. In the capital city, a child found a piece of a human letter thrown away by soldiers. She could not read all of it, but she held it close because the letters looked soft, not sharp like imperial writing. Soon, even children began drawing symbols that looked like human letters on walls. Soldiers tried to erase them, but every night new ones appeared, painted fresh, glowing with defiance. Captain Tarlock, who had first found the strange box, felt the shift more than anyone. He was summoned to the capital for questioning. Officials accused him of spreading weakness. They demanded to know why he had not destroyed the box at once. He told them he followed protocol and preserved it for study, but inside he carried guilt. He still kept the original letter hidden inside his armoire. Small secret that made him feel more alive than all his victories in war. For the first time in years he doubted his empire. A general in the war council shouted that humans were clever manipulators who used gifts as silent weapons. But another general whispered under breath, "Maybe it is not a weapon, maybe it is something." We never understood. Their argument nearly turned violent before the emperor silenced them with a roar. He declared humans a dangerous infection and ordered every patrol to burn their gifts without delay. But orders are fragile when hearts are already touched. Soldiers who once obeyed every command without hesitation now hesitated. Some burned the packages, but not before secretly eating the food. Some destroyed the letters, but copied the words in their own language and shared them with friends. The Empire could crush armies, but it could not crush curiosity. One night in a mining colony far from the capital, a group of workers found a package floating near the atmosphere. They brought it down and opened it. Inside, a hidden tunnel inside. They discovered food unlike anything they had seen. One worker's child, who had been weak and starving, ate and grew strong again. The miners were speechless. They passed the letter around, reading the human words again and again. Some cried not because of the taste or the healing, but because for the first time in their lives they felt someone out there cared for them and asked nothing in return. The story spread faster than the Empire's punishments. The people began calling the gifts light. From the dark, soon whole villages were waiting at the edges of their skies, hoping to see a white box drifting toward them. The Empire's officials raged at this foolishness. They said it was impossible for humans to give without demand. They ordered the execution of anyone caught praising humans, yet each execution only spread the whispers further. Cruel truth began to rise in quiet hearts. The Empire had ruled them with power for ages, but in a single season humans had touched them with kindness. and it felt stronger than fear. More boxes appeared, more soldiers hesitated, more children whispered about Earth in their sleep. And deep inside the Emperor's palace, unease began to grow, because power can silence voices, but it cannot erase hope. The war front stretched across burning fields and broken cities where the Empire's armies clashed with stubborn rebels who refused to surrender. The air was thick with smoke and the cries of the wounded, but even here the whispers of human gifts had begun to reach the soldiers. A young officer named Darren sat in the mud, staring at the lifeless body of his friend. He had fought many battles and seen countless deaths, but this one broke something inside him. His friend's daughter back home had been sick for months, and no medicine of the Empire could heal her. Just before his death, the friend had begged Darren to send something, anything that might give her a chance. Darren had no answer until that evening when a small white box was pulled from the wreckage of a crashed shuttle. Soldiers crowded around it, whispering it is one of theirs from Earth. The commanding officer shouted to burn it at once, but Darren froze when he saw the familiar words, "May you never suffer alone." His hands trembled as he opened the box. Ignoring the threats of punishment inside was a bottle of medicine with clear writing. He slipped it into his coat, and when night came, he sent it secretly through a trusted courier to his friend's family. Weeks later, a message returned. His friend's daughter had recovered. She was walking, smiling, alive. Darren fell to his knees in the dark, and for the first time in his life he cried. He had obeyed the Empire since childhood. He had followed orders without question, but now he realized that the Empire had given him nothing compared to a single human box. The crack inside his loyalty widened. The next day, when soldiers gathered to destroy another gift box, Darren stood silent. He did not stop them, but he also did not join them. Instead, he remembered the smile of the little girl he had saved, and that memory weighed heavier than the Empire's commands. Across other battlefields, the same cracks appeared. Soldiers who once burned letters now kept fragments. Hidden soldiers who once mocked human words now whispered them at night like secret prayers. Commander discovered one of his men carrying human cloth under armor. He struck the soldier in rage, but when the cloth was pulled away, the commander himself paused, for the fabric carried no trick, no trap, only warmth and care. He sent the soldier away unharmed, but all who saw knew the commander himself had hesitated. That hesitation spread faster than fear in villages occupied by the Empire. Peasants began asking soldiers, "Do the humans really give gifts? Do they care about us?" The soldiers should have silenced them, but many only looked away, ashamed of their answers. In the capital, reports of disobedience reached the Emperor. He roared in fury, demanding executions to restore order. Some officers were dragged into the streets for hiding packages. Some workers were whipped for repeating human words, but instead of crushing the spirit, it only showed how much the Empire feared kindness. Darren soon found himself caught between duty and truth. His unit was ordered to storm a colony suspected of harboring human gifts. As they broke into homes, he saw terrified families clutching small boxes of food instead of weapons. One child held out a letter to him, whispering. The human said, "We are not alone." Darren could not strike. He lowered his weapon and walked out. His comrades looked at him in shock, but one by one, a few followed his example. They searched homes but left the boxers untouched. A silent rebellion had begun, not with banners or armies, but with soldiers refusing to crush kindness. The Empire could not see the danger yet. They believed loyalty was strong, but the cracks were spreading in every direction. For every soldier who obeyed fully, another hesitated. For every citizen silenced, another whispered the human words louder. Darren knew he was risking everything, but he also knew he had crossed a line he could never return from. When night came, sat by the campfire, staring at the stars, he thought about Earth, a place he had never seen, a people he had never met. Yet they had given him something more powerful than the Empire ever had. They had given him a reason to question, a reason to feel, a reason to believe that maybe another life was possible. The Empire had trained him to fight without mercy, but the humans had reached through the darkness with nothing but simple kindness, and that was why his loyalty no longer belonged to the throne. A soldier who once fought only for fear now carried hope hidden in his heart, a hope that would soon spread across the galaxy and shake the Empire more than any weapon ever could. The Emperor's throne room was filled with firelight as he listened to the latest reports. His empire that had ruled with iron for centuries was shaking, not from invasion or rebellion, but from words. Written by unknown human hands, boxes of food. And medicine had turned into sparks of defiant. Soldiers who once obeyed every command were hesitating, and families who once bowed in silence now whispered of hope. The emperor's voice thundered across the chamber. Enough, if kindness is poison. Then we will burn it from the roots. He gave his order. Anyone caught with human gifts would be executed without trial. Soldiers would raid homes, burn the packages, and erase the letters from existence. The message was simple. Fear must return at any cost. The raids began. At once patrols stormed into villages, ripping apart walls and dragging families into the streets. Boxes were seized, piled together, and set on fire before the eyes of weeping children. Letters that said, "You are not alone," were crushed into ash. Soldiers who hesitated were punished alongside the civilians, but the Empire did not see what they were truly doing. Every time they burned a letter, the words were remembered by those who had read it. Every time they executed, villager others whispered the story with even more strength. Captain Tarlock, who once brought the first box, stood in silence as he watched flames consume a pile of gifts. He could still feel the weight of the hidden letter inside his armor. His men looked at him, waiting for an order, but he gave none. He simply walked away. For the first time, officers began noticing that silence itself was rebellion. On one colony, a young mother was dragged into the street, accused of hiding a human blanket. Soldiers tore it from her arms, but instead of crying, she shouted the words written on it, "May you never suffer alone." The soldiers froze. The crowd gasped, and before anyone could stop them, others repeated the phrase soon. Dozens of voices shouted it together. The soldiers panicked and opened fire, but the chant did not die. It only spread across the colony. The Empire crushed the protest. But the seed was planted. The Emperor doubled his punishments, yet even generals began to doubt a report reached him that entire squads had returned from raids with fewer boxes than expected. Some soldiers were secretly hiding them, others secretly sharing them with their own families. The Emperor accused his council of weakness and executed 2 advisors on the spot, but even this act only added fuel to the whispers. If the throne feared kindness, then maybe kindness was stronger than the throne. In the far mining belts, workers began to risk their lives smuggling human gifts instead of rare metals. In the military barracks, soldiers carved human words into stone walls and shared them in secret. In the academies, young cadets were caught drawing the strange letters in notebooks the Empire tried to erase, but the more they struck, the more the people believed. Darren, the young officer who had saved his friend's daughter, lived with the weight of his choice. He watched villages burn and yet saw hope rise from the ashes. Each time a box was destroyed, he felt anger, not fear, for he knew the Empire could never erase what the humans had started. At night, he read the letter again and again, holding on to the words that gave him strength. He began to notice other soldiers doing the same, hiding scraps of human paper, carrying cloth inside armor, or keeping medicine bottles as relics. They were small acts, but together they formed a quiet army, not of weapons, but of hearts. The Emperor, however, believed he was winning. His advisors told him fear was restored, villages burned, boxes destroyed, traitors executed, but outside the palace reality was different. The Empire had made martyrs out of farmers and heroes out of children who dared whisper human words. The raids had spread the idea to places it had never reached before, even in worlds untouched by human gifts. People now spoke of Earth as if it were a legend, a place that sent kindness across the void, a place that cared when no one else did. The Empire struck harder, hoping to break the rising faith, but in truth, every blow only cracked its own armor. The people were no longer blind, and the soldiers were no longer loyal without question. Captain Tarlock stared into the burning night sky and realized what the Emperor could not. You can burn letters, you can silence voices, you can execute the weak, but you cannot kill hope, and hope was spreading faster than any army could march. General Kale sat alone in his command chamber, staring at a small scrap of paper hidden beneath his armored hand. It was part of a human letter, torn and burned, but still readable. The words said simply, "May you never go hungry." He had destroyed hundreds of such papers in public to prove his loyalty to the Emperor, but this one he could not bring himself to burn. He remembered the look on his soldiers' faces when they saw villages executed, not for weapons, not for rebellion, but for hiding food. That humans had given freely something inside him shifted that day, and it had only grown since. He had served the Empire his entire life, and loyalty had been the only language he knew, yet now he began to see cracks even in himself. Reports reached him daily. Entire units were found keeping packages hidden or distributing food secretly. Families and colonies were whispering human words as if they were sacred chants. Even palace guards had been caught sneaking medicine from evidence storage. To their sick families, the Empire demanded endless executions. But Kale knew if he carried them out honestly, half the army would vanish overnight. He began lying in reports claiming loyalty was strong, when in truth, it was already gone the throne. Still believed fear was absolute, but Kale could see that soldiers no longer fought for the Emperor. They fought for survival, and many quietly fought for the words of strangers from Earth. Darren felt this unstoppable wave. He watched as his fellow soldiers who once mocked him now approached quietly, asking if he still carried letters. He shared what little he had, and soon small groups would gather at night reading human words under the dim light of campfires. Sometimes they read silently, sometimes aloud, but always with the same effect. The words gave them strength to wake the next day, not as tools of the Empire, but as men who knew a better world was possible. The Empire tried to tighten its grip harder, but with every tightening, more slipped through its fingers. In the great city of Jarn, civilians painted walls with human phrases at night. Soldiers were ordered to erase them, but by morning they would appear again, brighter, stronger, as if hope itself had grown hands, and refused to be silenced. In another colony, children refused to chant the Emperor's anthem. Instead, they whispered, "May you never suffer alone," until soldiers dragged them away. Their parents wept, but also stood taller than before. The truth was spreading so fast the Empire could not stop it. Kale realized that the most dangerous weapon was not the food, not the medicine, not even the letters themselves. It was the idea that someone cared. It was the thought that somewhere far away lived a people who believed strangers deserved kindness. That thought broke chains more effectively than any blade or gun. He met with other generals secretly. Some still clung to the Emperor, but most admitted the same. They could not control their men, not anymore. They could not erase the human words, no matter how many executions they ordered. They feared that the next time the army was told to crush a rebellion, the soldiers might refuse entirely. Kale asked quietly, "What if the Emperor commands us to march? On Earth, will we obey?" The silence in the room was his answer. Darren saw the same truth on the battlefield. When ordered to burn packages, entire squads looked the other way. When told to shoot civilians, some soldiers fired into the air or struck the ground instead. Loyalty had become a mask everyone wore. Yet behind it, their hearts were already gone. The Empire was crumbling, not from invasion, but from inside. Every chain it forged was breaking with the sound of human words. The Emperor screamed louder, demanded more punishments, but his voice no longer carried the same fear. The people were no longer afraid of dying. They were afraid of living forever without kindness. That fear was stronger than death itself. Kale finally stood before the War Council with his secret paper hidden in his fist. He listened to the Emperor rage about traitors, about humans, about cleansing the galaxy with fire. But Kale did not hear him anymore. He only heard the quiet words inside his heart, "May you never go hungry." He looked at the faces of his fellow generals and knew many of them were hearing the same silent echo. The unstoppable truth had come. Humans had never sent fleets, never fired weapons, never invaded a single world, yet they had done what no enemy in 1,000 years could do. They had made the Empire doubt itself. And when an empire doubts its own strength, it is already lost. The Emperor stood at the center of his golden throne room, while the fires of rebellion burned across his empire outside the palace towers. Entire districts refused to obey orders. Soldiers marched as commanded, but when told to strike, they hesitated. And when told to kill, they lowered their weapons. The throne that once ruled through fear now shook. Beneath whispers carried from world to world, whispers of human kindness. The Emperor roared at his generals, demanding they restore order, but even they had grown silent. General Kale stared at the floor, his fist clenched around the scrap of a human letter that he could never burn. Darren stood among the lower officers, his eyes steady, refusing to look away as the Emperor shouted at them all. The great armies of the Empire still filled the stars, but they no longer belonged to him.
Howdy.
They belonged to the words that had spread from 1,000 small white boxes. May you never suffer alone. May you never go hungry. Those words had broken chains. More effectively than any warship could outside the palace gates, the people gathered not with weapons, but with voices. Entire crowds chanted the human phrases, their sound echoing louder than the Emperor's guards could silence. They carried no banners, only scraps of paper with human writing held high. Soldiers lined the walls, ready to fire, but when the order came, none obeyed. Some even lowered their rifles and joined the crowd. The Emperor could not understand. He had ruled longer than most of them had lived. He had broken rebellions, crushed fleets, erased entire cultures, yet he was being undone, not by armies, but by kindness. He screamed that humans were weak liars, manipulators, but even as he shouted, soldiers began to march into his throne room. They came not in formation, but in silence. One by one they stepped forward, placing human letters at his feet. And then, turning their backs to him, more arrived with scraps of cloth, medicine bottles, or food packets saved from the raids. They set them down and walked away, the throne room floor filled with the symbols of kindness, until it looked like an altar not to the Emperor but to Earth. The Emperor's rage turned to fear. He called for his guards, but none came. He called for his council, but they had vanished. His voice echoed through the vast hall, but it no longer commanded anything. He realized too late that fear could chain bodies, but kindness had freed hearts, and hearts, once freed, would never again kneel. The palace fell, not with the sound of gunfire, but with the sound of silence. Soldiers abandoned their posts, civilians flooded the streets, whole planets declared they would no longer obey. The Empire fractured like glass struck at its core. Generals refused orders, colonies refused taxes, workers refused chains. Darren walked among the crowds, watching as soldiers who once carried weapons now carried letters. Children painted walls with human words. Women sang songs that carried across cities. Hope had become louder than any command. He held his own letter close, remembering the face of the child he had saved long ago. For him this was victory, not of war but of meaning. General Kale stood on the balcony above the Capitol Square. He looked at the millions below, shouting in unison, "Earth, Earth, Earth." He closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him for the first time. He felt peace, not the forced peace of silence, but the true peace of hearts that believed in something greater than fear. The Empire had not been destroyed by weapons, fleets, or invasions. It had been destroyed by something it could never understand or control. Humanity had shown the galaxy a strength deeper than any blade, the strength to give without asking, to help without gain, to care without reason. The throne that had stood for centuries now lay empty and forgotten, while across the stars people repeated the words that had set them free. May you never suffer alone. The humans themselves never knew how deeply their small acts had changed the galaxy. They had not planned to topple an empire. It only sent kindness into the dark, not knowing who would find it. Yet that kindness had traveled farther than any warship could, and it had done what no conqueror ever achieved. It had broken the Empire without a single shot fired,